So, Daredevil Born Again, Season 4/Season 1 of Daredevil, depending on how you look at things. Reboots are weird. I wanted to do a video about this episode because I think it captures the fun and tension that can be achieved through TV, not just Marvel. Like, what makes a really compelling episode, a single contained story bottle episode situation. Do you consider it a bottle episode if you've never really seen the location before? I think this episode is incredible. I do have some issues with it. This is one of those episodes that if you don't know anything about Daredevil or any of these characters, you can just stumble onto this episode and it'll be a pretty good introduction to the characters and who Matt Murdock is and his whole deal. The episode opens on St. Paddy's Day, which means something different to if you're not Irish, if you're Irish, if you're in a different part of Ireland. There's a complex history based on that day. And I think to have the people performing the heist to be Irish and to set it on this day adds a whole another layer of tension. Here's the day that's set in. Here's a blind man, Matt Murdock. He can hear very good, way better than a normal human being. Of course, you're watching this, you already know that about Daredevil, and that's what makes him so cool. Matt Murdock and Charlie Cox's portrayal of Matt Murdock is some of the greatest casting I've ever seen in any show, in anything, definitely in Marvel. We hear a bunch of interesting characters. You see this one couple who later gets involved in the crossfire of a hostage negotiation between the terrorists and the police. We see this she comes off as like a social media influencer type, but there's something about her, the way like they design her costume, her bag, her use of her cell phone. Who calls it cell phone anymore? It's a smartphone. Everything about this character stands out. Just look at the color of her jacket. This flags importance to me when I first saw this, and I was like, okay, fun character, maybe just like a throwaway thing. It's not a throwaway. It's very intentional. Where's the camera? This is the camera. It's very intentional what they do. This one guy, he also gets mentioned later on in the episode and also the episode right after this. And interesting strategy that Disney did while they were releasing this series. They decided to release this episode and another episode on the same week. I can see why, since this episode, after you watch it, you kind of just wonder, what's the point of that? But also it doesn't add much to the plot. It feels kind of fluffy. It feels like it's there as like a intermission for the dreariness of the series and what you've come to expect with Daredevil episodes. There's so much value to a bottle episode because it forces characters in a confined space, usually in real time, so that they have to react in this unfiltered space. So it feels like there's this natural progression to what they're thinking and how they respond to certain situations. And we're going to see the way that Matt responds to a situation in a very Matt Murdock way. Here's some of the stuff that I didn't like about the episode. I hate Funko Pops. I keep forgetting the camera's. I hate Funko Pops so much. I think they are so lazy and so lifeless. And that's why they're so popular, because they're so affordable and so cheap to make. They're just not my thing. Something or someone else I didn't like or had conflicted feelings about was the return of Mohan Kapoor, who plays Kamala Khan's dad. Just look him up because it's quite disturbing, the allegations laid against him. But he gives a really good performance. The character is a lot of fun, but there's this thing in the back of my mind. If you're gonna recast people in your series and your movies, or just dissolve their characters away, like with the Jonathan Majors thing. You have those two options, and I'm really questioning why they didn't recast this actor who seems kind of, But anyway, he plays a very important part in connecting all these pieces together in the episode and potentially connecting the Young Avengers for a future series. Now, this scene right here, it's not subtle to Matt, but subtle to the audience, where it's like, it seems to be this like fun gag. Oh, how do I talk to a blind person? How do I show him that I have treats? I would use my sense of touch to make sounds, to approximate where something is. It's a fun little moment, and it also feels like it could have just been cut from the episode and it wouldn't have made a difference, but I was wrong. It's a very brilliant use of a prop. Later on in the episode, we see that social media influencer, she's like, something is going on. Oh, maybe it's the bad. So she's in on it, A very basic thing that I see a lot of films and media not doing that they really should do to help distinguish action. The Fede Alvarez directed The Girl in the Spider's Web does a really poor job at this, where everybody is dressed in black and they're fighting in a dark, smoky room. And I'm trying to figure out what the fuck is even going on here. With this, you don't really have this problem because you get this color-coded troupe of whippersnappers. We also get a glimpse into some of the background characters that I don't think have a name, but stand out because they look very distinct. And this guy looks so distinct, and he is one of the unsung heroes in this episode, which I really appreciate. Like the idea of an everyday hero who does the right thing and stands up for people. And sometimes it doesn't work out because he's just a guy. One of the things that Born Again does very well, and arguably better than the original Daredevil series, is the way that they portray Matt Murdock hearing things. The way the camera really zones in, the camera kind of distorts in a way, and you're there trying to be in his shoes and to also figure out in real time just what's going on, make you feel like Matt Murdock. And immediately he identifies a disturbance, and his first thing to do is to call 911, which is a bit conflicting based off of past episodes, and you'll see this come up later in the next episode. But at this point, that's what he chooses to do, and it's a very smart thing to do, and probably his only option before he heads back in. He also knows that he's a blind guy, so no one is going to suspect that this blind dude is going to be this incredible boxing martial arts expert and gymnastics guy. So back to that lady, we also hear that there's something unusual about her. Her heartbeat isn't speeding up like the hostages are. One of the main things that make Matt Murdock so cool is that he can hear when someone is tense, usually to detect whether they're lying or not. You can try to manipulate your body in a way to prevent things from fully being revealed, but it's hard to hide that. It's what makes him a really good lawyer and a really good superhero and a really, really cool character. I also just want to share that since I've been watching Daredevil, Born Again specifically, and I've just had a lot of difficulties recently trying to get my life together. Watching Daredevil and reading his comics just kind of reminded me that, hearing is a very important part of living, especially when you have that and you know what that feels like. It's something that you should protect if you can. Something that I like enjoying is hearing the world around me. Sometimes it's very noisy if I'm in the city. Sometimes it's very quiet if I'm in a little neighborhood or in a park. A hobby of mine right now is identifying birds around me with a little app. When there's a bird, I can usually figure out what bird it is based off of their song and their calls. I could detect whether there's a different bird that I haven't heard before around me. I could also detect where it is, so I could use my binoculars to really admire them from a safe, fun distance. But anyway, I also love that the show also chooses to show you who the perpetrators are. We see Devlin earlier on in the series as the guy who shoots a bunch of dudes in a truck. He's really memorable despite being just one of the cogs in this giant mechanism of organized crime. He's also played by Killian O'Sullivan, and this is my first time being exposed to his work. But also, he seems like a guy that you kind of want to get drinks with after. Not that I do that, but I do feel like I would love to hang out with this guy. It's hard to explain. There's a lot of charisma to his performance. And I think if they chose another actor with less charisma, it wouldn't have made this episode as memorable. I think, again, casting does so much to make up the tone of the episode. And this episode strikes a really great balance of humor, sarcasm, fear, tension, action, relief. Like, I know it's based off of, inspired by Spike Lee's Inside Man, but it also reminds me of Heat and the prologue to The Dark Knight and how fantastic and memorable those bank scenes are. By showing the other background characters here, it reminds us that despite being in organized crime and committing a very dangerous heist and being considered the bad guys of the series and the story, they are still just humans. They are just guys. They're just trying to live and survive. It brings compassion to a lot of the characters in Daredevil because no one is really truly evil. You know, evil does exist, but there is a purpose and a reason for that evil to exist and how someone becomes evil. With Bullseye, that's a rare example of a really creepy creepo who is quite evil. You know, there are people like him in real life who are just truly terrifying, but rarely does that really happen. I think the show does a great job, and I'm going to say that a lot, of just humanizing characters that you wouldn't want to humanize, or you would feel uncomfortable with humanizing. I think that's also what makes Kingpin so compelling to a lot of people, and why a lot of people, including me, thinks that he's probably one of the greatest, if not the best, Marvel villain so far, and complex villain for a very long time since the premiere of the original series. So Matt has this really heightened sense of hearing, and he can hear what's going on in one room where the bad guys are. They're bad guys. I don't need to do quotes for that. He could hear them. He could hear the people beside him around the hostage area. He can hear who's outside, the police, and how negotiations are going. And so this allows 3 different branches, and he's in the middle of that branch, listening in to see how things develop. He's like a one-man army, the way he listens to things. And superheroing stuff and supernatural things aside, there's a lot of things we could learn from the way he listens as well, just as a human being, to just listening to how the people you talk to interact with each other, listen to how music works, and also during tense situations like this, like a bank heist, and I really hope you don't get yourself into that situation. But, you know, the state of North America as it is. A lot of tense situations happen in malls and happen near me. You just gotta be listening in all the time and just assessing the situation, whether it's work, survival, protecting people around you and yourself, listening to animals, listening for enjoyments. I think that's the key takeaway to Daredevil for me personally. So Detective Kim, played by Rubio Qian, they're a very charismatic actor with a snark to them that makes them stand out. Again, this show does a wonderful job of casting all these really distinct actors and directing these really cool performances, and they stand out in a really wonderful way. Now that I've seen this episode, I'm just on the lookout for Detective Kim. And I think the chemistry that they have with Killian O'Sullivan is also A+ stuff. The way they talk, despite phoning it in, they don't really phone in their performances at all. I think they chat with each other so naturally that it's hard not to be convinced that they are the characters that they're playing, and they're in this very tense situation and power dynamic. And that power dynamic between the negotiator and the criminal can change on a dime. And I think that's also another element to this episode that makes it such an entertaining watch. If you really step back and really look at what's happening here and really listen to what they're talking about, the power balance between the police and the robbers, if you remove Daredevil from the equation, I think the bad guys here have the advantage. They could shoot anybody they want. The police and Detective Kim knows that. And things kind of get really nasty towards the end. Very close to absolute destruction and people getting critically hurt. And the steps it takes that leads there feels very natural. It also contributes to the incredible pacing of this episode. The episode is 40 minutes long, on the shorter side of the series, and it feels like it's a little bit longer. This is, of course, counting credits. And I think the illusion of feeling like it's naturally long without being boring has a lot to do with the different stories that occur in the episode and how they all feed into this one story. All of these stories, the story with the thieves trying to do their thing and get this diamond from a vault, the story of Detective Kim trying to negotiate the safety of the hostages, but also knowing that she and the police just doesn't have time, because logistically, how are you gonna deliver something if everything in this area is shut down because of what's occurring in the bank? And then the last thing is what's happening with Matt Murdock and Yusuf Khan. How are they gonna react to the situation, not only to keep themselves alive, but also to keep the other hostages alive? And then there's another more subtle thing that you figure out by the time the episode ends, is who's in on it. What is Matt assessing? What is his plan? What we understand of what's going on with Matt's machinations of the mind is what the episode is choosing to show us with what he's hearing. There's no, I'm thinking this. There's no thought bubble. There's no inner narration like in an anime. You're just watching Charlie Cox quietly thinking to himself and quietly maneuvering the situation and planning and trying to plan and communicate as much as he can that is necessary, but not everything, to Yusuf and to the hostages and to people robbing the bank. And so I love this idea of finishing these three plot lines, these three, the A, the B, the C plots, and also revealing a motivation. By the very end, the couple that we see at the very beginning of the episode comes back up here, and they negotiate for one of them and also Matt to be released. Matt decides to be the hero here and says, hey, these two are together. Why not just let them go out together? There's an undeniable charisma, not just as a viewer watching Charlie Cox portray this character, but also the charisma that the characters in the episode and the show witness. You know, there's a reason why a lot of people in his field find him to be pretty good negotiator and a really good lawyer. To be a really good lawyer, and I'm pretty sure this is true for people in that field, you got to be a really good public speaker. You got to be really good at arguing and acting very charismatic to try to convince the jury of your argument. If you suck at public speaking and arguing and you're tired and you come off as tired, it's very unlikely that the jury will pay attention to what you're saying. He's calm and collected in a lot of these situations, especially in this situation. And he answers some questions. He's a very interesting person. And so the more that Devlin learns about Matt Murdock, it's like, oh, he's Irish. He's an orphan. He's blind. He's a solicitor. All right, what a weird, unusual person. So I think the motivation for Devlin to keep him in here, I think might be weak if the assumption of the viewer is just like, well, he needs to be in this heist environment because it's a Daredevil show. He needs to be in this episode and in the most intense situation to figure out what's going on. And it feels kind of forced. But another way to look at it is I don't think the episode does too well. I think that we just needed a few inserts of Devlin's mask and face to just really clue into his thinking. But it's really hard to convey that because he's wearing a mask. I'm thinking that Devlin thinks that Matt Murdock is someone that you might need to keep an eye on because he's unusually calm. He's also kind of annoying and also unlikely, but is true. He is quite dangerous. And also he's acting as a hero. And to get into the mind of a guy robbing a bank with his gang, you don't want to deal with a hero because you have a plan to get this diamond. You don't want to deal with a hero because they're going to completely discombobulate you and just throw another wrench into your plan. Because of his presence, anything can and will happen. Not to mention that he's also blind. A blind hero, maybe he does something heroic and he trips and falls and he falls on somebody and a gun goes off. A lot of things can happen. I also love how uncomfortable this episode made me feel, the way people with guns deal with a blind man. Just no remorse. You're just another hostage and you're an abnormally annoying hostage that might be a threat to us. So we're going to threaten you with violence and we're going to inflict violence and suffering onto you as an example. Okay, so back to the hostages. We get this really illuminating conversation between him and the guy who washes the murals for Kingpin. We get that charisma from both of these actors seeping through. He gets to briefly interact with the lady who's in on it. Whether this was planned or not, I'm pretty sure it is planned because he heard the lady's heartbeat earlier on and sensed that something was up. She gives a very illuminating suggestion that she admires him for being a hero, but also please sit down so that this can all go smoothly. And on the surface level, you're like, oh yeah, go smoothly so that the hostages don't get hurt. But, later on you find out she wants the heist to go smoothly. This is also a great move from Matt to say that he needs to go to the washroom. It's awkward to have a blind man ask you he needs to go to the washroom and he needs your help to do that. What are you going to do? You're going to probably react the same way as Mr. Red does here, to just point the gun at him, guide him into a washroom to let him do his thing, get him out, but also really don't want to be left in a very uncomfortable situation of witnessing a blind man shit his pants. I'm not an expert, but I think that doing something like that and saying that you need to go to the washroom and using your bladder and your your poop as a weapon to discombobulate someone, I think that's a really interesting and good strategy. But I did get to talk to a bouncer, and he said that while he was on the job to disarm a heated situation where a guy was very drunk and was about to inflict some violence upon the staff that was working at this bar, he said pineapples are spiky or pineapples are yellow. And then the guy who was drunk was like, oh, yeah, I guess. And so by saying something very strange and random and very uncomfortable that disrupts the natural flow of the way someone thinks the plan is going, in this case, the heist, and in the story of the bouncer and the drunk guy, they're both thrown in this awkward situation and they're completely discombobulated. That's something to think about next time you're in a uncomfortable situation. And maybe it's the key to how you survive and deal with something in a very peaceful but also weird way. Now, the first time I saw that fight scene where you're directing somebody, a hostage, to a secluded area, and in this case, the hostage is actually Mr. Red, and Mr. Red thinks that Matt Murdock is the hostage. You know there's going to be this really badass fight coming, and it delivers in a very fun way, and also, at first, very strange way, because hearing this fight, it feels very dry in the mix. Everything is isolated and there's not any reverb. And I'm thinking, you're in a big staircase. Why isn't anything ringing out like they would? And the main reason is that Matt Murdock is trying to muffle out anything that would draw attention to what's going on in the staircase. He wants to do a silent takedown like Agent 47, but with more martial arts finesse. I love the way that he disarms the knife and disarms the gun, disarms the person he's trying to muffle the physical contact with. It's also a good thing that they're wearing layers of clothing, which helps to make this go as smoothly as possible. Another thing I thought that is in support to how awesome Charlie Cox is for this role is that he gives a very good Irish accent, and it definitely convinced Devlin. I'm not Irish, obviously, but I do wonder if you're Irish and watching this video, what do you think of his accent? Is there like a specific part of Ireland that this feels like? I'm sure they consulted a bunch of dialect coaches to bring this scene to life, but it's really fun to just see him. I love seeing actors acting as a character acting. There's this double layer of acting that you gotta do. That must be such a fun challenge for an actor to do. Speaking of Irish accents, Rubio Chen is also sounding pretty hilarious in doing that accent that they do. Yusuf and Matt return to the main stage here, and we get reintroduced to what Matt hears. He hears that time is up for the criminals, for the police, and for the hostages. All hell is going to break loose in Hell's Kitchen. He knows that his role right now, before he does his superhero stuff, he needs to stall just a little bit. Just enough without drawing too much attention, because he's going to do a little bait and switch here with the prop that he's going to throw over and pass to Devlin. And what makes Matt Murdock ideal for this situation There's smoke bombs everywhere. People can't see, and neither has Matt been able to see for a long time. But he can just maneuver around like he's getting up off of bed and just brushing his teeth. It's just a routine at this point. He's walking around this easier than we walk around our bathroom, is what I'm saying. At this moment, it really clicked for me that, yeah, if you were to see Matt Murdock in a situation where he is the best to have in a situation like this, to be a person incognito for this situation, to be the perfect pick. Of course, like, I would feel safe with Matt Murdock. Of course, we find out that this lady here is in on it, and first time around, you're watching this episode, you're like, okay, who's he gonna go for? Is he gonna disarm the lady? Is he gonna go after Devlin? One is very violent, and one is the main chess piece that is moving here. So I think the right call would have been to go after the lady, but the way that Matt has planned the situation and does a bait and switch, this decision makes so much sense in retrospect. You can't let Devlin walk around completely unharmed and still able to do what he can do in a future dangerous event like this. I love this moment of Devlin going outside because he can disguise himself as a cop. I love that the Joker did that in The Dark Knight, and I love how Javier Bardem's character did that in Skyfall. I just love this shit, you know? And to see it happen in this really fun show just brought me a lot of joy. And also, this really fun preamble and aesthetic to this brutal takedown between Devlin and the Devil of Hell's Kitchen. And to end this episode off, we find out that the lady who was in on the heist got the little baggie that's supposed to have the little yellow diamond thingy, but turns out it's been replaced by a butterscotch candy, which pays off in this really delightful ending to the episode where the yellow diamond was in the butterscotch candy pile all along. Also, there's a little shiny sound effect, which is so cartoonish, and they really didn't need to do, and it's really dumb that he did, but also it's such a perfect sound effect to end this really entertaining episode, and hits at just the right moment to cap off this very fun moment. So that was Daredevil Born Again, episode 5. I've just been waiting for the right time to figure out something to do about it, and here we are. I love Marvel, and I would love to do some more Marvel-related content. Let me know if that's something that you are all interested in. Let me know if you have any ideas of what you want to watch in this channel. And I'm Snackers Prime, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya. Be good to yourself.